All right. And welcome to episode 21 of the Maverickcast. I'm here joined, returning to the show, Ben Shepard from Students for Liberty.
The Survivor.
The Survivor. And I'm introducing two new members today. I have Zach and Phil from Students for Liberty here. So I always like to have people give something of an introduction. So go ahead, give me your major, hometown, future plans. Go ahead.
Well, my name is Phil Sajazi, as Andrew said. Something that a lot of people tend to know about me is I have a staff. It's a pretty small staff, but most people don't have a staff, so that's pretty impressive. Just kidding. I'm a political science and economics major. I plan to attend law school and then eventually run for office one day.
All right, Zach, go ahead.
My name is Zach Feldman. My friends call me the Moderate, and yeah. So I'm from a small town in New Jersey, and I'm not that political in the sense that I'm going to school for political science or law or anything like that. I'm actually a microbiology major, but I love being part of SFL and just talking about the issues and being informed on things and. Yeah, this is going to be fun.
So, are you a big Christie fan, being from New Jersey?
Oh, my God.
I don't think there's only one person that I know who's a huge Christie fan, and I'll leave him nameless for now.
I didn't absolutely hate him until the whole Bridgegate thing happened.
Yeah.
But as, knowing what I know now, just like whether it's about just general policies or about Christie personally, I'm not a big fan of him. But what I do love more than anything is a video of him dancing and shaking his butt to the soundtrack of Numb by Linkin Park.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's going in the link dump for sure. So another question I ask everybody who comes on, what political figure do you most align with? Could be a politician, a media pundit, yeah.
Pitt student.
I'd have to say Congressman Justin Amash, Libertarian, running as a Republican. From the 3rd District of Michigan, consistently libertarian, more so than Rand Paul, I'd say.
I would say Rand Paul is the person I look up to a lot. As far as like pundits or people go, I like to listen to a lot of podcasts. So I think a couple of people that I am similar to on policies and just my overall demeanor, I would say I like Ben Shapiro, for instance. He's a little bit too conservative for me sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I also like Dave Rubin on the Rubin Report. Those are just a couple people here or there that I identify myself with.
I'm a big podcast guy too, obviously. And did you guys have a favorite candidate? Because I know Ben was on before, and you can answer this again probably. Did you have a favorite candidate in the Republican primary, or did you follow the Libertarian primary a lot more closely? Because I know Phil's a registered Republican, and so is Ben.
I'll start out again. Yeah, just so if you didn't know, I supported Rand from the beginning, and a couple of the other candidates I liked was Ted Cruz, and I definitely like Ted. I ended up voting for Ted in the Pennsylvania Republican primary, although I will say it was tempting to cast that vote for Jeb Bush, even though after he had withdrawn. But that being said, though, I also liked Rick Perry, and I actually did like John Kasich because one of my professors was childhood best friends with John Kasich, so I felt a little bit of a connection there. And I also have to represent my Hungarian heritage with George Pataki, who my mom was a fan of.
I say this almost every week. I voted for John Kasich. It's out there. All right, guys, go ahead.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I also I kind of voted for John Kasich. So I voted for John Kasich for the delegates. But in the New Jersey primary at the time, it was only Kasich, Cruz, and Trump.
Oh, and everybody was dropped out, except for Trump, right? Yeah.
So yeah, I put in Kasich for the delegates, but I wrote in Rand Paul for my actual vote. And yeah, I was a big fan of Rand Paul. Ted Cruz, I like some of his stuff, but I think he's a little hawkish on foreign policy. A couple other things I disagree with him on. And then once Rand Paul dropped out of the race, that's when I kind of started looking at who was running in the Libertarian Party, and then I ended up in general just voting for Gary Johnson.
Okay, Phil, go ahead.
So before the Iowa caucuses, I was a big fan of Rand Paul. In 2012, I supported Ron Paul. And then after the Iowa caucuses, leading up to them about a week out, I saw that Rand was going to finish pretty pretty towards the bottom, you could say. So I hopped on to the Cruz crew, and had the chance to meet Ted Cruz and John Kasich at a campaign stop. And and then I eventually decided to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, so that's a question I definitely want to get into later on, like to kind of catch up on that front. So just to state the date of recording as we're getting ready, it's March 30th, 2017. And I want to go ahead and plug our social media before we get started. We're on Twitter, Facebook, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Instagram. Nobody follows us on Instagram. Go do that.
I'll hit you up there.
We've one more. I said last week, nobody calls Sean Hannity. Nobody follows us on Instagram. So the objective of this episode, I want to continue my conversation with the Libertarians that I've had on. Ben has been on before, but these guys are new. And today we're going to talk about the biggest issues that they see facing the country, as well as catching up on some news that has happened since the last time we've talked on the podcast. So first off, I want to talk about Gorsuch. Obviously, I've said before how much I love the pick. This was a huge driving factor of why I decided to vote for Trump. And I'm curious what you guys think from a libertarian perspective about Gorsuch.
I can start on that. Just one point is I am a registered Republican still. I'm a small L libertarian, just to clarify if there's any doubts. I don't think I'll ever really be a registered libertarian anytime in the near future. But anyways, so Gorsuch, I think it's a really good pick, and I have to say, I personally don't buy into the whole Democratic narrative that the seat was stolen, because it clearly says that you have to get a majority of senators to come on board for it. So, if you can figure that, put your brain cells all together, you can figure out that you need the Senate to confirm. The president's not a king last time I checked. So, but yeah, Gorsuch is a phenomenal pick and much better than Merrick Garland. Because Gorsuch, for example, I was really big on the D.C. versus Heller ruling. D.C. versus Heller was a really key case for the protection of our Second Amendment rights. What D.C. versus Heller did was it overturned restrictions on handguns that were draconian in the District of Columbia. In D.C., before D.C. versus Heller, you had to have your gun unassembled and you had to have it locked away in a safe or something before you could even use the gun. That seems like a pretty useless gun if you're trying to protect your life. Merrick Garland was in support of that decision, which is a no-brainer for me. I can't support a pick like that. So Gorsuch is a strong believer in the Constitution. He believes that we have to follow the Constitution. This isn't about going with what we feel is necessarily the right thing to do, or necessarily what we should do in our hearts. We have to do what's right for the Constitution. We have to do what's right for a smaller government, and we have to respect the legal system. And Neil Gorsuch clearly is incredibly intelligent and will do just that.
Do you guys have anything you want to add? If not, I have another question.
I really like the Gorsuch pick. I've been very critical of Trump since he's become the president. I've really not approved of anything he's done, but I think the Gorsuch pick was a really good pick, and I'm pretty surprised he actually picked him, because Gorsuch he is a strict constitutionalist, and I think he would disagree with Trump on quite a few issues.
Yeah.
I think particularly I think Gorsuch is actually, he's more likely. I was reading an article in Cato about how Gorsuch is probably more likely to vote against the travel ban that Trump is proposing than Merrick Garland would have, because Garland he was a centrist, quote unquote centrist, so that kind of lends him to bigger government. So he would say, you know what, let the government do it. So and I think that, if you read the article, I think it details it a little bit better than that, but I really like Judge Gorsuch.
Phil, go ahead.
Well, I think the decision for me to vote for Donald Trump was really rooted in a speech Ted Cruz gave back in April of 2016. And he said, we're just one radical justice away from having our First and Second Amendments be a thing of the past. And when I began to look at our current justices on the Supreme Court, I realized that, obviously Scalia's gone, and, you've got 3, possibly 4 justices that are going to die in the next 4 to 8 years. And so if Hillary Clinton was going to be the one picking those justices, I thought, truly the Second Amendment will be a thing of the past. And so I had very little faith in Donald Trump to pick pro-life justices, which I wanted him to, but I wanted him to pick constitutional justices, and he's done that. And so for me, it was worth it to vote for Donald Trump.
Absolutely. Ben, you wanted to add something, right?
Yeah, so when I think you guys remember how Trump put on basically a reality show with like the final two picks,
yeah.
where it was between Tom Hardiman, who was from Pittsburgh, and Neil Gorsuch. And Hardiman, another fun fact, I guess I'm getting into this professor again. He's a great professor, by the way. If anyone gets the chance to take Judge David Sircone, make sure to do it. He also is friends with John Kasich, but he actually let us out of class an hour early when they were doing that announcement. He's like, I want to go see my friend Tom to see if he's been nominated for the Supreme Court. So that was pretty cool, though, I will say.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows? Maybe even a couple months from now, you know, he could be. Yeah,
it's crazy.
So another thing, this is a question I just added today, right now. You know, what have you guys made of the left's response to Gorsuch? Because I mean, it's just been so vitriolic, and I think it's just way out of line.
I think it's honestly, I think it just goes to show how crazy the left has gone since Trump has been elected. I'm not a big fan of Trump, but I think that the left goes so far over the line with their criticism. They just want to oppose him no matter what. And Gorsuch is honestly like a really respectful judge. He's a really great pick. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's the accusation of sexism or some sort of character assault. You know, it wouldn't be the left without that type of character assault. And I really dislike the way they were questioning him in the hearing, for instance.
Yeah.
And they're kind of just asking him to, what would you decide on, insert case here? And he's just like over and over again, like, I can't rule on a case that hasn't been done yet or is currently in progress. Like, it just shows they don't understand what a judge is. And I think the worst part is that they're people like Chuck Schumer talking about filibustering him. I think that's honestly the dumbest idea.
And absolutely. And to branch off, I think, if the left does this every single step of the way for Trump, it's just going to ruin their own image. I think that's a battle that you have to wage very, very carefully. And I know there are those like on the very progressive side who are saying, filibuster anything that Trump tries, anything pro-Trump in the Senate. So whether that's a confirmation, stop, everything that he tries to do. And I think it could be disastrous for the Democratic Party.
Right. Yeah, I think
I have to say what my aunt told me when I was still like 9 years old still rings true. Democrats are whiny, and that's never going to change, I don't think. I'll never be a Democrat.
Even, the thing that got to me the most about, just because we're talking about confirmation hearings, the Kristen Gillibrand, senator from New York, voted against Mattis for Secretary of Defense. Like, it just blew my mind. Like, everybody acknowledges, like, Mattis is extremely well qualified. Like, you can't be that blind to vote against someone. But yeah, let's get back to Gorsuch.
I think it's just the filibuster is such a dumb idea because nothing is going to change on the Supreme Court. It's literally just going to be just the way it was when Scalia was. Except instead of Scalia, it's going to be Gorsuch.
That's a great point.
They should save their energy for, let's hope Ruth Bader Ginsburg croaks it. Sorry, I don't mean to be too mean, but she's horrible. But if any other justice either retires or dies, or the Supreme Court justices, are they allowed to retire?
They can resign.
They can resign.
They can resign. So if one of the justices resigns, okay, let's say Ruth Bader Ginsburg resigns, not dies. Okay, I don't want to wish death on someone, but if somebody on the Supreme Court, if there's another opening, then I would understand because then you're going to be upsetting the balance of the court. But there's nothing. The balance of the court is going to be the same.
Well, yeah, if I can,
go ahead.
In 2006, I believe it was, when Gorsuch was nominated for the 10th Circuit Court, it was a voice vote. No Democrats raised any objection to him then, and so I think that there's only one of two possibilities. Or one of three possibilities. Either the Democrats were not thorough in their investigation the first time around, and they let the American people and their constituents down in 2006, or something has changed with Neil Gorsuch, and in the past 10 years he's become a sexist and a racist and not qualified to sit on the highest court in the land. Or number 3, which I think is the most likely, is that they're still pissed they lost the election and now they're just going to drag this out. And I think the Dems are really kind of mismanaging their resources. I thought that they went after the wrong person in DeVos. They probably could have gotten Jeff Sessions denied the Attorney General seat, and I think here again they're going after the wrong person. I think Gorsuch is just a constitutionalist through and through. He's baffled Democratic senators who have tried to get him to trip up during the hearings. I think that they should save it, save their energy down the road.
Yeah, I think those are great points. So I know Zach touched on this a little bit because I've talked to Ben on the show before about the Trump administration. So what have been your thoughts? I want to keep this brief. Your thoughts so far on the Trump administration, because we could go on all day about this. Just some things you've liked, some things you don't like. Like I know I like Mick Mulvaney, and I think you guys probably are the same way. Yeah.
See, I guess there are maybe just one or two things that I've liked about Trump. The first is Gorsuch, and second, there was just something that came out, I think it was today. I don't know if this is much about Trump or if it is what the Senate did, but there was a vote on something to do with abortion, about defunding Planned Parenthood or holding funding. And, I am personally pro-life, so I like the steps that Trump has taken towards the pro-life direction. So on those two things, both, what's happened in the Senate and what with Gorsuch, I really like that. I am not a fan of the travel ban or
neither am I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tobacco, all that.
And quick side note: are you guys all pro-life libertarians?
I am pro-life.
Yeah, I'm pro-life.
Very cool. I know what they say. It's split 60-40 amongst libertarians. Interesting.
I was pro-choice, but I switched over. After hearing
And don't
many important people in my life
in,
who were mostly women and who got me to go over to the other side.
And even as a conservative, I will never act holier than thou to somebody who has changed their mind on the issue. I think it's one of the most difficult issues out there, and I will not ostracize somebody for the length of time that they've held the position. Yeah. So Phil, what have you liked? What have you not liked about Trump so far?
Well, I think one of the biggest things about Trump that I was drawn to was that he was going to shake things up. It was not going to be Washington, D.C., and politics as usual. And he's done just the opposite of that, I think. In terms of, getting Goldman Sachs any position they want in the cabinet, when he specifically targeted them in campaign ads. With this healthcare debacle, he's not... it's not so much that Donald Trump is not taking the side of the Republican Liberty Caucus. It's that he's taking the side of Paul Ryan and, solely to get something done. And I think it's just that swampish-like activity that really has me disappointed in him. There are some things I've liked about Donald Trump. And, I think his desire to cut the budget, cut some spending where it needs to be cut. I think a lot of people are upset that Donald Trump wants to cut funding to the arts, and Big Bird isn't going to be a thing anymore. And I think that while I agree with many of my libertarian colleagues that it's not the part of the budget that we need to cut the most, I'm of a mindset that where we can cut, we should cut anywhere and everywhere. And so, the arts are still going to exist without government funding. And quite honestly, I don't think the government should play any role in what, people are consuming, especially small children. I mean, that leaves the door wide open for all sorts of, corruption and coercion.
No, I'm absolutely with you. I don't think the government should be funding through the National Endowment of the Arts. It's not the purpose of the government. Art has existed for thousands of years without government support, and it'll continue to do so without it. That's why I said, I love Mick Mulvaney. I don't think Trump could have picked a better person to head OMB. So I promised today that we're going to talk a little more about the most pressing issues that you guys see facing the country. So I guess the format this can be is going to be, each, because we're about 20 minutes in right now. So each person can have about 10 minutes each, and we can discuss what they want to discuss, and then move on. So who wants to start first? What do you guys see? Phil?
Yeah. So Ben Shepard and I have been talking maybe in the past few weeks, what is the biggest problem that faces this country? And, we've looked at it, from all different kinds of views. And we kind of discussed that there just isn't enough money in the economy, if you really break it down, So what I mean by that is taxes are too high, and the government is, sucking up too much money, and sure, they're funneling it out via services, but are those services really helping? Things like the welfare state, the endowment for the arts, military spending, etc. And, when you look at the federal budget, let me just take a step back there. A lot of people think that the welfare state is run through the federal government, and that, that's where a lot of your tax dollars are going. Actually, the welfare state is largely run through your individual states, and that's where, things like our, PA liquor stores, flow into that budget. Anyways, you look at what's really, what American taxpayers are spending their money on. It's Medicaid, it's Medicare, Social Security, and the military. And of course, you as a Republican, myself as a Libertarian, we're going to butt heads like crazy on military spending.
Yeah. In fact, if anyone was in attendance last night, we had the conservative versus Libertarian foreign policy debate, and that was one of the biggest driving points. But yeah, go right ahead.
So, I'm currently reading what's called A New Liberty, For New Liberty, a Libertarian Manifesto by Murray Rothbard. And he, looks at very impoverished communities and, backs it up with data from various universities around the country and says, is the welfare state actually helping? And, are these poor people actually making an effort to get a job? And, what he found was, for the most part, was that, and I'll take, for instance, a neighborhood he cited in Washington, D.C., their payouts were $50 million to the federal government as a community. Everybody in that entire neighborhood was living below the poverty line. Now, what they received back from the federal government was $45 million. So a net benefit was negative $5 million. Now, I don't care if you're Bernie Sanders or if you're Rand Paul. That kind of system doesn't seem to work for us. That's not helping anybody. That's taxing the poor, not even giving back what they paid to them. And one of the things that I think is so fundamentally flawed in our tax system is Social Security. My father is a sole proprietor, and so, usually if you're an employee, you pay half of Social Security. Your employer pays the other half, but my father pays the full 14 cents on the dollar, and that kills him. I mean, he'll likely never see that in his time. Social Security is set to go bankrupt at 2035. So 20 years from now, he's just going to be on the cusp of retiring. It's likely that he'll probably never see 14% of every dollar that he's made. And, I think it's just incredibly unfair to the young people, especially those who haven't, turned 18 yet. They can't even vote on the matter. And, they're forced to pay into a system in which it's likely that they'll never see the paycheck again. And, I think one of the worst things about Social Security is that poor people pay into it. And, they're not set to receive any more than rich people who pay into it. And also, I don't know about you, but I don't see very many poor people walking around with an extra 7.5 cents out of every dollar that, oh boy, now I can just blow this money. It's not like that. It's forcing people into a system which will never grow. Social Security just sits around. It's not like it's grown. It's actually going to pay for somebody else's retirement at this point. And, it's negatively and disproportionately affecting poor people. And another beef I have with Social Security is that, when you move the money into an IRA, it's growing. I'm going to, use Dave Ramsey from my high school personal finance class. When you grow, when you move money into a mutual fund, it's going to grow anywhere from 8 to 12% annually, until you're ready to pull it out when you retire. And the best part about that is that you can add to it when during the good times when you're financially able to. And one of the great financial wizards, Dave Ramsey, will tell you, you can't afford to invest when you can't pay the bills. And it's kind of like the government is telling you that you have to invest, except it's not growing, it's just sitting there, and it's a bad scheme. And even another interesting thing about it is that the Democratic candidate for state representative back home in Lancaster, flat out told me, I'm a Democrat, but I don't believe in Social Security. I think it was, the biggest Ponzi scheme ever invented, that we were going to, pay for people when they're older. And, when FDR founded this in 1935, it was a system that was, set up to take care of people who probably weren't even going to receive it because of, the difference in life expectancy. And now we've got people living so much longer, and it's just not. It's a system that isn't really. It hasn't been adjusted to fit with the increments in life expectancy. And so with all that to say, I think we haven't even touched on the fact that it's unconstitutional to force somebody to pay into something which they're clearly not seeing an immediate return on their investment. We pay for roads, okay, well,
when there's roads.
All right, yeah. We pay a gas tax, okay, well, we get some road improvements.
New Jersey, we have the highest gas taxes in the country.
We pay a sales tax, and okay, we go to the public school. But we pay property tax, we go to the public school. But with Social Security, it's set up in a way which, somebody else is receiving the money that you're paying in, and if you're under 30 or 40 right now, it's likely that you're never going to see it again. And so my final point here is what really got my attention onto Social Security and the Ponzi scheme that it is was Mike Lee sent out an email to the entirety of the Rand Paul for President email chain. This was back before the Iowa caucuses, and he and Rand were reporting on an incident that happened the night before. $150 billion was taken out of the Social Security Fund in a midnight Senate vote. Nobody knew about it. And, they used that money, $150 billion, which is, about 15%. The entire Social Security budget is about $1 trillion per year. 15%, and used it to keep Obamacare afloat, keep the Obamacare fund afloat. So I don't want to get into Obamacare, but that's just wrong. That's theft. I don't want to talk about, is Social Security theft, but stealing it from one account where you have promised the American people that it is going to be there for you, and using it in any way which you desire in the darkness of night, I think that's incredibly immoral and unconstitutional. So that's why I'm opposed to Social Security, and why I think that it needs to be fixed or ultimately sunset.
Absolutely. So, if you just had like a 1 or 2 minute solution, you touched a little bit about IRAs, which I'm a huge fan of IRAs. So do you want to see the entire system privatized? Because my thing with IRAs, nobody knows how to spend your money better than you do, and I would love to see people have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I think that's a great point is, nobody can spend your money better than you. Nobody knows your week-to-week or month-to-month struggles, certainly not a bureaucrat or a senator in Washington, D.C. So I think that we've got to, make good on our promise to pay out what we said that we were going to pay out. And I think that if this involves going into further debt to ensure that, people 25 and younger or 35 and younger do not have to go into this Ponzi scheme, I think it's worth it. I think, like I said, we've got to make good on our promise. I would say 35 is a decent cutoff. Maybe 35 to 45. Maybe meet us in the middle on your payout, and 45 and up we will hold true, and we will pay out. But 35 and under, I think you've got to be exempt from Social Security, or at the very least, offered a way out. And I think that we've got to do more, and if we're not going to do that, we've got to do more for poor people. And the middle class, how can we help them retire? And so if that involves, further tax cuts on an IRA, be it the money you put in to start or the money you take out at the end, I think that those steps need to be put in place, and just generally tax cuts in general, so that, those people, sure, the government's going to come around and take 7.5 cents on the dollar, but how can we help them be better prepared if a bill were to be put in place? The Democrats certainly wouldn't go for it. How can we help people work around that tax of Social Security?
And this would be our last word on the subject. This is probably the area where I disagreed with Trump, potentially maybe the most, because Trump didn't want to touch Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we have to move on. So who wants to go next?
I don't have much to say, so it would be a more shorter presentation of what I want to talk about. So I just want to talk. I'll go next. Okay, all right. I'll go next then. So what I want to talk about is sort of a new way of I want to basically give people an opportunity to stimulate the economy like no one has ever seen before. This is not through government spending or anything like that. This is going to come through a tax cut. I just want to really present the opportunity of why I'm proposing is a flat tax. For those who don't know what a flat tax is, I sort of given it a new nickname. It's called the equality tax. The reason I call it the equality tax is everybody pays the same thing. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter if you're Phil. It doesn't matter if you're a golf ball diver. It doesn't matter if you're a singer.
I'd be paying a lot in taxes.
I know. But everyone's going to pay the same thing in the equality tax. I want to just say what Rand Paul's plan was, which was a 14.5% tax rate on all types of income. And there's still some deductions and exemptions. And we'd eliminate the corporate tax, and we create a 14.5% business transfer tax. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the VAT because it's a complex thing that I don't know if we have a lot of time on. And I'm not a huge fan.
We can give the Spark Notes version of the VAT, but I want this to be your time.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to really get the economy moving. And I just want to present exactly what the flat tax is going to do. It will end up growing the economy. It's going to be absolutely crazy. What it will end up doing is the tax cut. This tax cut will result in the creation of 4.3 million new full-time jobs. That's the amount of jobs in the state of Kentucky, just to put that into perspective. Further, what it's going to do is you're going to end up having more. You are going to have some budget revenue issues. But that being said, though, we're going to grow the economy so much more that you're going to be able to account for like hidden revenue that's not being accounted for already. You're going to be able to really get down on this revenue, and you're going to be able to really tap into it. Everybody's going to be paying the same thing. You're not going to necessarily have these people hiding under deductions and stuff like that. So it's really a good idea because you're not going to have these crazy deductions. Like, I know there's a deduction for if you have your child practice the clarinet. That's silly. Like, we don't need that deduction, really. We just need to grow the economy, and we need to promote policies like that. That's 4.3 million jobs if we promote this plan. And the other thing I want to touch on is the federal deficit, which just probably alone.
Oh, this could be an episode.
I know, just this alone. It's such a major issue and needs to be tackled. I can't even imagine, since the time we just even filmed the podcast, how crazy it's going to get, because I'm just going to check the clock right now because I guarantee it'll be changed. The U.S. national debt clock reads that we are at a total of, man, that is a lot of numbers. That looks like 19,856,952,600. Oh, now it's 700,000. And I can't even count the dollars, and it's just absolutely crazy.
Do you use debtclock.org?
Debtclock.org.
Yeah, I'll link this bot in the link dump below. They have a ton of information on the site. But yeah, go ahead.
It's crazy. It's going. The prices keep going up and up and up. But yeah, so I mean, one of the things is my dad's a bankruptcy attorney, so obviously for someone like me, if I can't even imagine what you would think if someone came in with around $20 trillion in debt. You know, that'd be a very difficult bankruptcy. So it's really about managing your economy and sort of making sure that people are paid. And it's not necessarily having someone down the line pay off this debt, because we have to keep in mind when we have such a big debt, this will lead to things like higher inflation. And inflation is bad. Inflation is when cost rises because the value of the dollar ends up going down. So what you have to keep in mind. Inflation is going to hurt the most vulnerable in society. It's going to hurt the poor. It's going to hurt the elderly. I like old people. And we have to make sure that we give these people our most valuable citizens who have fought bravely in many wars, World War II, Korea. And there's some of the greatest people that we have left, and we have to make sure that their retirement is the most peaceful retirement, most enjoyable retirement as possible. Further, if we continue the debt as it is, if we keep on growing and growing and growing the debt, you'll end up seeing that stuff that we'll end up losing economic gains and stuff like that. It's going to cost us a lot of things, and we don't want to go down the road of Greece. We have to make sure that we're a stable financial country, and a flat tax will explode our economy. If we cut the debt, we'll even keep the economy more stable. This is about American financial independence from other countries and American financial dominance over other countries.
Yeah,
that's all I gotta say.
That's great. I mean, I love talking fiscal policy with you guys because I like having people who want to go in the weeds and talk about it. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I'm not probably totally in the flat tax camp. I like Trump's proposed plan, which collapsed into 3 different brackets. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, we agree so much with regard to free trade, getting this under control, deregulation. So I guess our last big topic, I want to give Zach the microphone and let him go right ahead.
All right, so we've had Phil and Ben talk about the debt and talk about Social Security and things like that, just, fiscal policy. I really want to change gears. So this is a little bit of an awkward transition, but one of the topics that's been on my mind recently is the idea of social justice. So after 3 years here at Pitt, I've noticed that this idea it's gained a lot of traction, and I think it's worth discussing. It's not even just a left-wing idea anymore. I've seen friends of mine who are entirely apolitical get drawn into this idea and this movement, and even friends of mine who are libertarians have, I guess you would say, flirted with the idea. And so the way I interpret, I think it's a difficult term to define. It's a pretty vague concept, but the way I interpret social justice essentially it's the idea that, you know, the scales are not balanced in our society, so we need to balance the scales so groups of people have equitable outcomes. And I have to say that, you know, it sounds nice on the surface to a lot of people, but I think that social justice is a really bad idea if you actually really think about it. I think it slaps the idea of individual justice in the face, to be honest. So it takes something like affirmative action, for instance. You know, if you get like a really good score on a standardized test, you're applying to college, you have a really good application, I think you should have a good chance of getting into college. And, you know, but now, or not just now, this has been happening for a while, there's, you know, the idea of making up for the past or compensating for a lot of poor conditions that many poor black people happen to grow up in. So you have situations where black students get accepted over people of other races, even if their test scores are much lower. And, you know, I personally think you should judge applicants by how good their applications are. It's not just, it's not fair that, you know, take for instance the average Asian student in the United States. They have to score on average about like 400 or 500 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of getting into a college.
The Asians are hurt the most by affirmative action of any other demographic, yeah.
Right, and when you talk about things like white privilege, for instance, people don't often talk about how white people are not even like the most successful, quote unquote, demographic in the United States. You know, I don't think group identity should matter, but if you're arguing with a leftist, that's a point you should bring up.
And I was making this point earlier today, actually, that's what separates us from the left. That we don't see people by the color of their skin, what body parts they have, who they choose to love. You know, we see people by the merits of their own individual person, and that's, you know, and that's one of our fundamental differences. But yeah, go ahead.
So I mean, I understand the point behind affirmative action. I understand the idea. It's like, but Zach, if you just judge based on good test scores, many black students will be left behind due to all these barriers that exist. It sounds great, but it's a little naive, don't you think? And, you know, what I say to that is essentially, you know, the solution is just, you know, remove the barriers. You don't change how, you know, you measure how someone gets into college. You don't change the application standards. And, you know, I saw there was a thing the other day about, I forgot which state it was that was dropping literacy tests because a lot of black teachers were failing or getting lower scores on these tests. And it's just like, shouldn't it matter that you're hiring teachers that are properly educating kids? And they were saying like, oh, we want more black teachers to be teaching black students. And I think, you know, why does it matter if the teachers are black? If you want black kids to have better education, you should hire the best teachers. And if they happen to, you know, whatever race they are, it shouldn't matter what their race is, you know? So I say social justice is a bad idea. I also think it's an impossible idea. It rests on this idea that life is a zero-sum game. It's the idea that it is a zero-sum game. It's actually the same idea that the Marxists in the Soviet Union used to demonize productive members of Soviet society, the farmers. And the Marxists would say that productive farmers were stealing wealth from the poor peasants. And now it was the haves and the have-nots, and now it's the oppressors versus the oppressed. And, you know, honestly, it's the same underlying logic, the same pathology, it's just different surface nomenclature, I guess.
Yeah, and to branch off, it's another point I was making today, actually. I see this soft bigotry, as it's called, on the left, and it's just so prevalent. I mean, who are they to say that an African-American student is incapable of scoring as high as a white student or an Asian student on the SAT? And it really gets to me with voter ID, because they say that it harms African Americans because they have a harder time getting IDs. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah,
it's insane to me to say that this group of people is less able to get a driver's license. I mean, that is nuts to me. That it's just passed off as just common knowledge on the left. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I watched this video the other day where they had like a guy going around interviewing random black people on the street saying, hey, do you know where the DMV is? Do you know how to get there? And they're looking at him like he's crazy. Like, why are you asking me? Like, these are obviously I know where the DMV is. Obviously I can get a driver's license. You know, and it wasn't like he was driving to a upper middle class area that happened to have a lot of black people in that area. This was just walking down the streets of a regular city, talking with everyday people. So you know, back to the idea of social justice, I think that, you know, the balance the scales idea. It's based on that flawed idea of a zero-sum game. And it's also based on this flawed idea of this, imbalance, so to speak, is caused entirely by like privilege, or that you need to take the weight off one side of the scale in order to balance it. I would say if you want to balance the scales, this can be done by putting on weight that it's not already on the other side of the scale. And I think the perpetrators of social justice ideas, that's to say professors, people in power in our institutions, not necessarily the student protesters of these ideas, I think can be naive. But I don't, the people in power don't want that.
So I guess before we wrap up your segment, I guess I want to ask this question to everybody. What I don't like is that, we can't have a conversation about this without the left insinuating that you're some type of, that you're a racist or that you're a sexist for holding these beliefs. And I was saying this earlier, that stuff hurts me. Like, it hurts me whenever I hear someone suggest that about me or call one of my friends that because they believe they're conservative or they're a libertarian and they believe certain things. And it just needs to stop, and I think it's something that, because that outrage culture is what we're seeing on the left, that if you disagree with one part of the social justice movement, then you're a bigot, absolutely. So.
Right. I have a personal connection to that. I have a friend of mine, I was saying, I have friends who are apolitical who have gotten involved in the social justice movement. I have a friend of mine who doesn't really know much about politics, and, I was just talking very broadly and generally about certain ideas, and rather than actually, comment on the content of my ideas or say, maybe I think your facts are wrong or your logic is flawed, she just outright dismissed me and said, oh, you just think that because you have white privilege.
Yeah. And
I honestly, I have to say, I really think that the idea of white privilege is racism. Just plain and simple.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, I don't know, I don't want to go on too long about this, but...
I'll let Phil get a point in.
So I'm kind of in the minority here of conservatives, and I happen to think that there is favoritism played towards white people in the criminal justice system, the war on drugs, etc. But the big difference between me and a social justice warrior is that I'm not going to make anybody feel bad, and I'm not going to dismiss anybody's arguments, and I'm going to hear everybody out, regardless of their skin color. I'm not going to dismiss somebody for trying to deny white privilege because they are white. And, I think that also, on top of that is, part of the reason why I'm a libertarian and why I'm a free market, a believer in the free market, is because I think that the free market has the power to actually help those in poverty, specifically, the minorities that, crony capitalism and socialism does tend to harm. And, I think that the social justice warriors just want to sit around and, they want to protest. And I think that the libertarians and the conservatives advocating for free market solutions, as I was with the Social Security reform, as Ben was with the flat tax, I think that that's actually a solution rather than just sitting around, in a campus, classroom, making white people feel bad about themselves. And I don't think that's helpful for anyone.
And I think it's a good point. I want to cut this down probably in a minute or two. But I haven't heard a solution from somebody who would identify as a social justice warrior. I mean, I'm curious. Is it bigger government? Is it, if X percent of the teachers in the United States aren't Hispanic, then a school should get fined or something. I mean, I just want to know what their solutions are. And I appreciate that you guys are offering solutions, because I think the American free market system is the only system in the world where you can build people up without tearing other people down. So, I mean, if anyone wants to get a last point in, and then we'll start to wrap up.
Yeah, just the last point I want to make. I think Phil brings up a good point, about like disparities of criminal justice system and things like that. I mean, I don't want not to get into like obviously this is a debate. You can have a 3-hour-long debate about statistical disparities and things like that. What I would say is the reason why I would say white privilege, I call it active racism, is it's not that there aren't aspects of life that make it seem like on the surface whites have advantages. There are. It's racism because assigning guilt or innocence to an entire race of people because of some broad general phenomenon, that's inherently racist. Is what I argue, and I think a lot of these people who perpetuate these ideas, they have good intentions in talking about white privilege or social justice, but they don't recognize that on a deeper level. They're very flawed ideas.
Great. So I have a couple of fun questions I'd like to ask people. Ben's already gotten a lot of them. So who are your 3 favorite presidents and your 3 least favorite presidents? You can tackle one at a time.
You guys already know my favorite president.
Yeah, Ben's been on the show,
Yeah.
so.
Top 3 have got to be George Washington, in no particular order. George Washington could have, come home from the war, taken Philadelphia, come in on a white horse, and never left the Capitol. And the Constitution never could have been written. He could have been a king. He could have stayed president for longer than 2 terms. Just on that alone, I think that deserves him a place in the top 3. Calvin Coolidge, of course. The recession, I believe the early 20s. Calvin Coolidge saw it as an opportunity to cut taxes, cut regulation. It was the fastest turnaround in economic history. And I'm going to throw in an unpopular choice and say Bill Clinton.
Wow.
Bill Clinton balanced budgets with the help of my favorite speaker, Newt Gingrich, throughout his entire second term. I believe that NAFTA was a good trade deal. And just in general, most presidents suck. So...
Do you know who the chair of the House Budget Committee was when it was when it was balanced in the 90s?
I'm going to guess it was John Kasich.
Yep.
It was John Kasich. I knew it was John Kasich, yep.
I would probably say my top 3 if I had to choose. I think I like George Washington. A lot of the things Phil said. Calvin Coolidge as well, but rather than Bill Clinton as a number 3, I would probably put John F. Kennedy, to be honest, as my number 3. I like, the whole ask not what you can do, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country idea. And, he was a very charismatic guy.
Yeah, people were surprised. Kennedy makes my top 3, too. So, least favorite presidents.
Do you want to start?
I will start. I will say Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter, and then, as of right now, Donald Trump.
Probably. Okay. All unpopular choices. Barack has got to be down there. Not so much what he did policy-wise, but just how he promised to be a peace candidate, was the opposite of that, continued the foreign policy of Bush, and just took the Democratic Party in a direction that I think is harmful for the nation. George W. Bush, the Patriot Act, invasion of Iraq, total disaster. And I'm going to say, as the third one, I'm going to go with Herbert Hoover.
I'd say Bush would have been a close pick for me. He's probably either my 3rd or my 4th least favorite.
Yeah. Another thing I want to plug before we're done, and that is I think we had a good conversation about social justice, and I want to continue that conversation at some point. I want to get maybe somebody from a liberal perspective to see how they view it happening on their side of the aisle. So I do want to continue that. Since we're running out of time, favorite place to get your news? Top 3 even, if you want to. Ben's already given.
Yeah, mine's still probably... I've been really reading a lot of think tanks, so I really like Cato and Heritage for policy, because I want to learn more about policy.
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty similar. I like Cato. I also like the Hoover Institute. As far as like media outlets go, I try to just diversify. I'll read things from the Washington Post or the Washington Examiner, which is kind of the right-wing equivalent of the Washington Post, and I like Ben Shapiro, so I'll look at the Daily Wire occasionally, or I'll read things on CNN every now and then, or Forbes.
Forbes, Wall Street Journal, CNN, probably for current events, and then a lot of the Cato Institute, a lot of think tanks, Heritage, Mises Institute, things like that.
Cool. I know Fee's very popular.
Yeah.
Libertarians too, yeah. So other than that, I think we had a great conversation today, and this is another question I ask every week. What did you learn on the Maverick cast today?
Phil, for some reason, likes Bill Clinton. Enough said. I don't know how you possibly can like Bill Clinton.
I try and keep it balanced, throwing a token Democrat.
Throw in another one. Not him. Jeez.
Yeah, I'm just in shock about Bill Clinton.
One thing I learned today, I don't know. What did I learn? I learned that the flat tax is, I think, probably favored the least by the wealthiest because of their loopholes and things like that. I think it would balance the playing field a little bit. And that's just another component that I didn't know about the flat tax.
I came up with a good Democrat, Grover Cleveland. As my cousin describes him, he was, quote, the man.
So I guess I learned today that if we can get a conservative with libertarian leanings, if we can get our fiscal policy through, I think we'll be in government forever. So please go ahead, like, share, subscribe, follow us on all forms of social media. It goes a really long way to helping us be more successful. I think we're getting better and better every single week, and I appreciate that. If you're willing, go ahead and support us on Patreon. That really helps us monetarily a lot. And I want to say thank you to everybody for coming on today, of course.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew and staff.
Thank you for tuning in. Me and my staff will be here next week with a Richard Nixon episode. Ben's ready.
I am ready.
Have a great weekend.